I'll take it.
Are you sure you're not interested? I was like, don't ask me again.
And it's a bad hair day too.
So she's like, scream for me, and then it's just that silence.
It was a good risk to take, and it was great.
Boom! I'm gonna try to give you a friend, and then I was like,
I wish you had like a granny mask.
That would be so cool, or like a ghost uniform.
And everybody was like totally freaked out.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Kia ora. Hello.
Hello, Mark.
My guest today was a part of the foundation of the Seattle scene in the early 80s. The album 1982 is set to be released on Loose Groove Records on April 16th, so fairly soon. Please welcome to the Eclectic Arts Virtual Studio, John Conte. Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. And yourself?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's kind of start with this album release and kind of maybe work our way backwards in terms of your background and everything. How did this recordings? How did it surface? Where did it come from? Because it was recorded so many years ago.
Well, I had the master to be open and honest about this. But what really happened was back in 2007. There was a record company down in Portland, Oregon that had heard the music and had started to contact the different band members, and I was the last one for him to contact. And it took him until 2008 to actually find my father, and he called my dad, and then I sat on the message for 3 months and didn't call him until January 2009. So he gave us an offer, and I had managed. So when he gave us the offer, I then took the master and found a good friend who is in the recording business. His name is John Sangster. He has a studio probably over in the Fremont, Ballard area. And he was doing what's called the chemical bath, because when you've had a master sit around as long as it had, they tend to disintegrate. But what I had done with the master was I had put it into a box that then was placed into a closet, and it was protected from heat and light. And because of that, it was in really good shape, but it still needed to go through this chemical bath, and you've got to do it right, or else you don't get anything on the tape. So it cost about $150, $200, somewhere in there. Got the tape to him, he did it, and then he took the tape and played it and digitized it and put it into the digital format. And then it was handed over to Greg. So Greg had it since somewhere in 2009, and he starts working on mastering it then. What's really cool is that he's had it all that time, and I know that he's been working on it constantly over the years. So he actually had more time to get the finished product, which is what we hear now. We did get a second opportunity from another record company down in Portland, Oregon, and this is in 2017. But I sort of fumbled up the deal because I emailed the owner of the record company and I asked him to release it sooner than what he wanted to. And he turns us down because of my email. And the email was a bit of a rant. But there had been a flag from this record company that sort of was leading me to believe that they were dragging their feet and that they weren't going to do what they were, said that they were going to do. And how I could tell that was because we had chosen the album cover that you see now, which is the photo of Todd. And that's a photo of Todd at the end of a gig down in Seattle in Pioneer Square. I was standing next to the photographer when that happened. And why we all love that photo is because you can see there's pure exhaustion in him. You can see that he's just elated. He's just higher than a kite. He's floating, but you can tell he's exhausted and he's just happier than that can be. He's living in the moment. They thought that album cover was too arty. That was their words. Too arty. That's a photo. That's just a photo. So that sort of told me that maybe they weren't going to do the record. And I was coming up in my email, I'm asking them to release the record because I'm coming up on my year anniversary of my spouse's death. She had died in December of 2016. And so it's now November 2017, and I'd like to have a lift. If you release the record, it'll give me a personal lift and make me feel just a little bit less remorse, less gloom. It didn't come to pass, and I throw in the towel. And I definitely threw in the towel last year because once the pandemic hit, I thought to myself, well, it's history now. And why it's history, why it's never going to happen is because the pandemic is more serious than arts and entertainment and sports and we've got to get through this. All of us have got to work together and do the masking, do the social distancing, making sure you're washing your hands, keeping things as healthy as possible, and don't get sick. And I just thought, we're not important. It's not going to happen now because it's too far down on the rate, just off the radar. So it was a total surprise. I don't know when. I have a feeling they must have started to talk sometime in the fall, and then they maybe started to get some ideas put together in December, and I think it got kicked off in January. I found out about it at work because I'm working at a warehouse where they're blasting music, all types of music all day. I'm the oldest one there at the warehouse. So I'm dealing with mostly 30 and 20-year-olds. And, they've got tattoos and piercings and, they're the rock and roll, heavy metal, punk rock crowd. And a few of the gals, they're married, but a few of the gals had managed to get me to, open up just a little bit. And I told them that, yeah, I played in a band in Seattle and, we were pretty good. And then all of a sudden, the last Thursday in February, shift change, and a couple comes in and the husband says, John, we just saw your video and your album's coming out April 16th. And I just like, what? I'm shaking my head. I'm frozen. I'm getting scared. I'm getting nervous because I'm hoping this is true, but I'm also hoping that I'm not a liar. Did I make this all up? And what do they know? What do they know? How could they know? And she rushes over to me and shows, and she's fumbling with her phone until she can get the right photo up. And she shows me the album cover, and I leap up in the air. I'm screaming. I'm running around screaming, yes, yes, yes. I mean, supervisors had to come into the warehouse. Some of the executives, they want to know what the heck is going on. Nutcase over there, his record's coming out. I'm just like, the minute I saw that cover, I knew that that everything that we had wanted was being honored. What I didn't know was who it was and just how it all came to pass. But it is the most exciting thing to have people that, acquaintances, your coworkers, and they end up knowing something that you don't know, and they surprise you. It's still too much it's too hard to, it's just magnificent. I've never been more surprised and so elated in my life, and so honored. And then that weekend, I go and, start logging on and looking at all the things. I started with the Revolver Mag, and I ended up reading over 21 different releases of the press release from all these different rock magazines all around the world, and reading all the quotes from Stone and Regan and even Duff's quotes. It's pretty intense, and it's pretty darn cool. And I'm really, it's come full circle. McCready from the band, he was hanging out at our rehearsals all the time, because he lived only a few doors down from Todd, our bass player. So he was hanging out every time we would rehearse. He can hear it. So he just comes down into the basement, and he's sitting there like, I don't know who he is, and I don't know that he's going to become who he becomes, but he's there. And then Regan and Stone are in the audience at our shows. And Stone says if we hadn't have been, then they might not have been a band. So to have them be the record company, it's more than just a blessing. You can see that we have come home, and we're being treated like hometown boys, and it's a hometown record company that's promoting us, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine having, especially the way you found out about this release, that you didn't even know was happening until someone, shows it to you, and then you're thinking back about the previous experiences with the folks down in Portland that didn't materialize, and you're kind of, part of you's got to be thinking, well, this probably isn't true. That's some old picture they found somewhere, or whatever, or some cover thing or whatever, and then you find out it's actually happening. And I can just picture you as you were describing that, yelling around at your job site and just kind of going nuts, and rightfully so, because it's been decades since this was recorded, to finally get it out there for everybody. Plus, like you said, then you went home and you saw 21 different news releases about it around the world, and just like it's happening. It's finally happening.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh. So this begs the question, when you guys recorded it way back when, what happened with it? Why did it end up getting shelved or sat on?
Well, the reaction that we're having now is very much like the reaction we were having then. We each, at the end of the session in late April, we each got 2 cassette tapes of it that were mastered cassette tapes. And I'm pretty sure that Duff took one of his masters over to Kurt Bloch, who had a cassette dubbing machine. Now, he couldn't have been the only one, because what happens is throughout that summer, we would drive, we would walk anywhere within the Roosevelt, Laurelhurst, and University District, and you would hear our tape being played in people's apartment buildings, in people's homes. It was being played in people's cars. And we're just driving around and we can hear it everywhere. So there was mass dubbing of it by everybody, loved it. And that sort of, I mean, in one sense, that sort of kills us from trying to press it ourselves and, to make a pressing. And also at the same time, that going into the studio was to get us a demo tape, because we, at that time, that whole spring until the summer, we had been blacklisted by a booking agent in Seattle. Every time we would get a gig, he would manage to cancel it. And this is happening over and over again. It even happened as quickly as a half an hour one day. I was with our promoter. We were downtown. We were working with a club. It was a bar, and we get the gig and we go back to his apartment, which is the closest, and which was on Queen Anne Hill. And we get there, and the minute we walked in, the phone's ringing, and they've canceled our already agreed to gig. And it was this guy. He wanted to be our manager, but we didn't want him to be our manager because we sort of knew that there was something bad about him. And to follow up on that story, 2 years later, when I'm not in the band, the FBI starts calling my home. And the FBI is after him. And I don't know why they're calling me, but I always happen to have his phone numbers. And how I'm happening to have his phone numbers is at that time, I'm a roadie for a band. And the guitar player, I know the guitar player, he's always giving me, hey, our band manager changed his phone numbers. Here they are. He's constantly, every couple of weeks, he's giving me the phone numbers. Here's the contact. If you can't contact him. Well, it took me some time to also remember that when I was in Eugene, Oregon, going to school down there at the University of Oregon, I had met his brother. And their father was either the chief of police in Eugene, or he was a high-level detective. So what's going on is this guitar player up in Seattle, he's giving me the phone numbers to this guy because he doesn't want the contact coming directly to him. But he doesn't tell me that the FBI is going to be calling. They called from anywhere to 4 to 6 months and finally tell me what, at the end of it, what it was that what was happening. So what is happening is, and why this guy was a bad guy, he was a cocaine dealer, and he's running shows, and he's at the door taking tickets, and he's also probably dealing drugs at the same time. And I had never known that. I just knew he was sort of a bad guy, and I didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Wow. Well, your instinct was absolutely right. Oh my gosh. And for people that are watching this now or watching this down the road, if you're 30 or younger, you probably have a whole different mindset about what things were like back then. I'm 50, so I grew up in the 70s and into the 80s. So having tickets and albums and cassettes and all those kind of physical things, which I love, and I'm so happy to see vinyl coming back, because even like your release is coming out on three different types of vinyl, I know.
Right.
So can you kind of paint a picture for people, like take us back to 81, 82 in terms of the club scene here in Seattle? Like, what was it like? Where were you playing? And what's it compared to, you know, more recent times?
So a lot of us had to band together. A lot of the bands had to sort of network together, and we would rent halls a lot, whatever sort of hall we could find, or we would go down to Pioneer Square and work with art galleries because they would let us in. And those would be a lot of the types of shows that we would do and if you were able to get a decent following, you would be able to start to get into some of the bars and clubs like that. But they were a little skittish. They were always skittish about having the power pop punk rock bands in, because they sort of thought that we were trouble because of the way we looked and because of the music style. And because of that, we're not playing constantly. It's not like there's a show every weekend. It would be more like a show maybe once a month or once every 3 weeks, where, you know, and it wasn't always our band. It might be a few of the other bands and not the Living and those types of things. It would trade off, but we'd all hang out together because we all knew that if we could just keep the motivation going and keep the unity amongst ourselves, that it would grow, it would network, and from our fans and friends to expand to others, to their friends. And that's what it did. But it wasn't as fluid as music is now in the city. And of course, not with the pandemic shutting everything down, but before then. It's sad to see some of the venues being threatened and to being torn down, because some of those places I think are still viable. You just need to put some money into them and, you know, spruce them up, and they're still golden. So that's sort of, I mean, and the places that to play were generally the bigger cities. So Seattle, Vancouver, BC, Portland, Oregon would be the main places. Spokane, but we never got east, would have been a place to go. So those are the types of places. Everett and Tacoma did have music scenes, but they were smaller, and a lot of us would have had to have a contact there to actually be able to get into those areas to find the clubs or, you know, the halls to rent. And those two places we didn't get to play at, which would have been fun had we had, you know, any of that networking and knowledge.
Okay, yeah, and for people that are, again, watching this that aren't local, Everett is north of Seattle and Tacoma is south of Seattle. So if you come to the airports, the Seattle Tacoma International Airport, SeaTac, and we've also kind of mentioned the Ballard area, which is like if you watch Deadliest Catch on Discovery Channel, some of the ships are docked there in the off season. So just kind of giving some geographic background for folks that aren't local like we are. But like even like in the video that I showed a clip of, you could see an old picture of the Showbox downtown off First Avenue. Yep. I think Guerrilla Gardens was in that clip as well, yes, and some other places. So that's interesting. And yeah, you're right. I really hope that once we get through this pandemic, that the venues that were there pre-pandemic still survive post-pandemic. Let alone, yeah, in the Showbox is a perfect example of that. There's all the petitions and all the political things they had to get going and it's still there. I mean, in terms of that struggle to try to preserve that place, because it's got so much history, and as do many of the places, you know, around here. Yeah, I would hate to see them close. And just as a fan, I can think of, you know, going to shows at it's not the off ramp anymore, but it's now El Corazon. But you know, with the sweat dripping off, the sweat dripping off the walls kind of shows, and there's so many bands that have been on those stages. It's just like, gosh, you want to see more, you know, more decades of bands being on those stages, you know, to come. So I hope it's like that. And I'm curious too, for people that are watching this, and you can kind of see in the background of our thing here, there's a young Duff McKagan. That's who we've been talking about when John mentions Duff. And correct me if I'm wrong, did Duff write the songs that are on the album?
All 7 of those songs are, yeah, that's his material. None of my material got recorded. So at the time, we've got maybe about a 45-minute set at that moment. It's our promoter who has bought us maybe 6 to 8 hours for somewhere like $400 or $500. And we decided, all of us, that we wanted, well, we first decided those first 5 or the first 5 tunes that are his, we wanted those to be recorded because they were the tightest and they were probably going to be the simplest to record. My numbers because my numbers are more traditional rock and power pop. They're not as punk. They're a little bit longer, that they might have been a little bit more difficult to record, or we might have taken more time to record them, because there's not that they're a difficult song to perform. It's just that my material was a little bit more melodic, and maybe it didn't match exactly these 7 numbers. We use up most of the time with the first 5. And for the second session, we only have an hour. And the second session, we end up with a different engineer, a female. So we've got 2 different engineers involved in the session, but she manages to give us 2 hours. She gives us a half hour where she just is setting up, and then she gives us a second half hour for free where we were just testing all the levels and the mics. So that gave us extra time to then be able to do the last 2 numbers. And again, we chose those again, which were his, because we were considering that we needed to be able to try to get them done and in the quickest amount of time, and we thought we could do that. So that's how we end up with those. And they were all of our favorites. I mean, those were real favorites of ours that were playing at that time. So yeah, they're Duff's.
And being the vocalist, did you have like input into the melodies, or was like everything already written in terms of, lyrics, music that Duff had brought to the band with these songs?
He had a pretty good idea of how he wants of what the vocal line is. I'm always able to expand it a bit, and he gives us. He gave us lots of leeway. Each of us, he shows us each the part, and we develop from there. Because I mean, I'm not exactly doing everything he wants in the songs, but I think I'm doing stuff that he likes. I know, because he never complained.
Okay, no, yeah, I would think if the songwriter didn't like something, they was like, hey, what you just did there on the chorus, yeah, that's not what I had in mind. I'm gonna go back and do it, this other way. No, so that's good that there's actual band input into those tunes.
I was also known then, before I even joined the band, that I was a good singer. And the reason I'm a good singer is because I was spending money to be taught how to sing well. So I'm working with a vocal coach, and he's a famous person. His name is George Peckham. And he was the #1 vocal coach in Seattle, Washington at that time. Some of his clients were the Manhattan Transfer, Hart, and Robert Plant, whenever Robert Plant would come into town. Robert Plant ends up owning a home up on Orcas Island. I'm not sure what year he buys that home, but he said whenever Robert Plant comes into town. So I was in good hands, and I had a reputation of being somebody who had a voice. So when we formed the band, I know Duff was excited to have me on.
Yeah, no, with that pedigree from your vocal coach, I think any musician would be happy to have you as their vocalist, including me. Oh my gosh, that's I didn't know that Robert Plant at one point had a home on Orcas Island. I've been going to Orcas since I was 3 years old, so I know that island very well.
I think he sold it a few years ago, but I know he did.
That's awesome. Well, and speaking of which, and I know I kind of have limited time, but John, so how long did the Living exist as a band before you moved on to other projects?
Summer of '81 till the fall of '82 is really our time frame. We started off with a different drummer, Chris Utting, and Chris and Duff would switch off on guitar and drums. We started, the band starts getting very popular that fall of '81, and Chris was involved in multiple bands, and he refused to meet our requirement of how many times we wanted to rehearse per week. And we had worked up to a schedule of we wanted to rehearse at least 3 times a week. And he said, nah, we're good enough. We don't need to rehearse. And so we had to kick him out of the band. And that's how we end up with Greg. And then Greg helps change and develop the band, because then Duff's full time on guitar. And that does put a little bit more pressure and responsibility on him, which at his age was, I think, a little bit overwhelming. The reason the band probably breaks up is because I end up I was the coordinator, and I'm doing so much of the business of the band business, that I'm not relaxed anymore. I'm not happy-go-lucky the way I was. I'm getting tense. I'm micromanaging, and I'm not funny, and I've developed a temper, and it's all from not sharing and being open with them. And then you've got the booking agent blacklisting us, so we weren't getting enough gigs. Duff's he's getting antsy. He wants to play. And we were rehearsing. We work up to rehearsing almost 6 nights a week. That's how much we loved it. We were just constantly rehearsing. And I was working. I had 5 jobs during the band all that time. And all the rest of the guys didn't have jobs. We're in a recession then, the first Reagan recession. And one of the songs I want is a rant from Duff about the fact that he can't get hired. If you read the lyrics, that's what that song is about. He's pretty mad that he can't get a job and be part of the workaday world.
Wow. That's interesting that he was like maybe 17 back then.
Yeah.
That he's writing about how he wants to be part of the workaday world and can't get hired somewhere because of the recession and his age. I'm sure it didn't help things.
Yeah.
And then seeing where everyone's paths eventually go musically. And I'm curious about yours, John. So when the Living did call it a day, did you take a break before you moved on to another band, or what did you do?
I tried to do something solo, but I never could get it up off the ground, and I just couldn't feel it anymore. I couldn't feel what I had felt with these guys, and I just sort of finally decided that this was probably the best, and this was it. This was the top, and so I do have musicians that have brought me out, and I've done, some tribute shows where, I do a number or 2 with a group. I've done a lot of improv with a guitar friend of mine, John Leighton Beezer. We had been in some groups together before the living. So that's the little bit of music I've done since then. But I basically just sort of hung it up and, called it a day. And having the FBI call you sort of was another reason why I didn't know how much trouble I was in, and that guy does get chased out of town. So, and he was managing a lot of the bands that are my friends then. He took their money, he took their cocaine, and he stole instruments when he gets run out of town. So they're all really mad at this guy. And I didn't want to get clobbered for being the reason why he, disappeared on them. But I have found out that they were all so mad at him that they would have been happy to find out that I was the person who was giving the information.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about the FBI angle involved with all of this stuff, especially back then. And we were talking about the 80s and a whole different era of America and who was in the White House at the time and everything else. I mean, granted, we're in a weird time right now, but that was having grown through the 80s myself. It's hard to explain to people that weren't around back then of what we were dealing with and the Cold War and everything else that was still going on. It was a very, very different time. And it's interesting that you felt like that you couldn't find that feeling again after you were no longer doing the living, and it was just not quite resonating with you with the other things. So I just figured that I would just kind of move on to other things in life. And I'm curious though, to kind of get close to wrapping this up. Things have changed a lot from, and we were talking about this, having physical vinyl cassettes, 8 tracks, all that kind of thing, and then it moved into the digital age with CDs and then downloads and MP3s, and now we got streaming everywhere. What's your take, just as your own personal opinion, about the state of the music industry now, even just from outside as a fan, on how you absorb or digest music?
The thing that worries me the most is that the artists still aren't getting the best contracts, I think, and getting the best royalty rates. And that sort of bothers me a little bit. I do think, though, with all the different means and ways that artists can get their music out is brilliant. And that has allowed so much art to come out. I think there's just mountains of artists now and all sorts of different styles, and you can find something that you like very easily, I think. But another thing that worries me though is that I don't see enough regional stuff that then goes more national. And it seems like you've got to be you either get to be one or the other. And so, for instance, back in the day when we were doing it, the music in Great Britain would take a year or two to get to New York. And then supposedly that sound from New York to get to LA would take another 3 years. So you're talking about maybe 5 to 7 years for a sound that started in Great Britain for it to end up in LA. Now, that delay no longer exists at all in the world. So you can get a new sound or a new product out much faster. But I think it's harder for us, the consumers, to be able to find things. I mean, to find that gem, to find that one that's growing, that started in a region, a small region, and then grew nationally, and now has made a bigger following and is going to venture over into Europe or something. I think that sort of growth doesn't exist right now, but maybe it'll come back. What's that phrase? Everything that's old again is new. I mean, something, I do think that cycles do exist, and I think we do repeat. It's just things things, it's like there's been no real advancement in the world. It's what the advancement has been is the speed of communication. That's what's been, it's the speed. But other than that, there's been no real major force, major change since, you know, communication has gotten to this point, but now it's the speed of communication and the speed of knowledge.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Again, for someone like me, and if there's someone out there that's say 25, they're used to having instant access. If they're curious about something, they grab their phone and they can find it. If they want to know what the living sounds like, they can go to YouTube and they can, oh, okay, this is what this sounds like. Back in our day, you might have to send a letter to someone and wait 6 weeks, and maybe you got a demo tape or like a price list sent back to you. Or if you had a friend and you traded in the underground and you saw a flyer on a pole somewhere in downtown Seattle, it was like, it took a long time. And like you said, communication can be instant now if you find out you get a hold of someone either via email, text message, direct message, through social media, all this kind of crazy stuff. And you're right, there's been a huge plus because of that. And on the flip side, at least for me, as a fan and also on the media side, there is so much out there that trying to dig through it, because everyone has a voice, everyone has a platform, and your band might be in the formative stages, and everyone starts somewhere. I totally understand that. But for me to get past you, to maybe find someone else that's really kind of clicking, in their area, their region, their country, there's just too much. There's just way too much.
Yeah.
And so for me to dig through it, I'm just fortunate when I do find something like, oh, who is this? What is that? And I don't care what level they're on, but then I want to find out more. But it's like I may have had to go through 50 other artists to get to that one.
Right. That's sort of why a radio station like KEXP is so unique, because a lot of those DJs are getting to do it the way it's meant to be done. They're working on their set list. It's a different set list every day. They're changing it up. It isn't chosen by the corporate office. And, you know, there may be some records that they do have to play, that they're asked to play, but they're doing it in an honest way. They're not forcing it. And, you know, there's no payola. And that is the way radio, and that's the way an artist really gets found. But the way the corporate radio, where it's just the same set list over and over again, you know, that's not so great for music, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm a super strong supporter of DIY independent artists. I'm wearing a shirt from one of them, so that will never change. And just to kind of wrap this up, John, just as a what if question. If there's some way to bring you out of retirement or whatever you want to call it, to do like a one-off gig of the living, would you do it?
Oh, yes, most definitely. It's been massively requested. Massively. Everybody. I mean, all those people at work have, and they're all finding out one by one. People are telling, hey, do you know Conti's a singer in a band? No, I didn't know that, you know, and they're coming up to me and they're just like, oh, you rock, you know. So yeah, no, there's lots of requests. Todd's been besieged by all the friends and all the fans to, yeah, you guys have got to play again. And he's got people spread out throughout the country, and they say, you got to let me know when it's going to happen, because they got to come into town to see it.
Oh man, no, that sounds like it's, at least it's the demand is there. That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, for everybody watching this, the record comes out on April 16th, and literally the record, you can buy a version right now. You can pre-order it through the website. And John, it was amazing talking to you and hearing about the band and what you've been up to and what things were like back while I was around in the 80s. But again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure thing.
Love the music, love the band, and I wish you guys a lot of success with the release.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Take care. Do well.
Bye-bye.